So where do I look?
So yours,
oh, okay.
This one is focused on you.
Oh,
that
okay.
one is focused on me. Then this one is both of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rolling? Yeah, you can start.
All right. So, Quiet Conversations with L. Jackson Pastor. Today I've got a very distinguished guest. If I'm not mistaken, she served as the first female bishop within a district which was in Natal West.
Coastal,
sorry, yes, the Coastal, within the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. And then she elevated and went even more higher and became the first woman presiding bishop, which was iconic for us at that time. It was during a time when we were, I think the world was going a different direction, and she managed to steer the church into the right direction. And in 2020, during the most difficult time in the world, she managed to help the church survive that whole period where we were lost, but at least we had some guidance. I'd like to welcome Reverend Dr. Purity Malinga. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Our former presiding bishop. And actually, it's nice that this year was a very nice year for you, even after supernumerary. You found yourself being honored as a doctor as well. Mm. And I think that was it was one of the most surprising, but one of the most greatest accomplishments, where we know that at least the secular world does recognize, what the work the church has been doing. Maybe you can give us a bit more of that time when you were getting how the process of you getting to the honorary doctorate.
Thank you, Elvis, for this opportunity to have a conversation. The process of being honored at UNISA, let me say, is that one of the council members has to nominate you. And I understand that the names, each member bringing a name, the names get discussed in their meetings and in different decision-making bodies of the universities. Yes. And if all those bodies agree that indeed this person has made an influence, has been an influence in the community, in the church, and so on, then they agree to then give you an honorary doctorate. First, they write a letter to you to see if you are agreeable, you are willing to accept the honor, and if you are, then you get a date and they invite your guests, family, and you get honored. For me, it really was a surprise, and I was humbled by the nomination itself. The interesting thing is that it was one of the members of the Manyano in our church who was a member of the council who nominated my name, and I didn't even know her, but she felt that I deserved to be honored in that way. And I really was humbled by it. And it came at the end of my active ministry. And for me, it was just like God is saying, you have at least done what I had called you to do. So it really made me happy.
Could it be then maybe God is saying you must still continue?
It could be, and I'm still listening as to where God is calling me, because retiring from active ministry is not the end of life.
Yes, that's true.
And so I know that God will open other avenues for me to minister. Before I became a minister, I was a teacher. Okay. And so teaching and influencing people is my passion. And so I am kind of looking at opportunities of doing that, whether through writing or participating with some institutions or groupings. Okay. But this year, 2024, has just been my year of rest.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Before I do anything else.
Okay, and thank you for awarding us this opportunity to come and speak to you and just to have a conversation just in and around the business of the church. And I'm glad that you were once a teacher as well, and teaching is one of your passions. And out of teaching, what we realize is that teachers have influenced a big majority of our young people in our society. And when we look at the way the church has been built and the way the church has been basically taking different directions in its ministry, we've seen the amount of young people that have kind of began to, some are beginning to rise in the church and some have begun to just take a step back. And I don't know, maybe could it be that the church's focus maybe has gone into a different direction? What do you think are the most important principles that can guide youth ministry today within the church in order to kind of have this legacy building?
Well, for me, the principles of youth ministry would differ on the method that denomination wants to use in influencing young people. But there are just 5 principles for me that I think are general, yes, without talking denominational doctrines. I think the youth ministry, as we're saying ministry, it firstly needs to be gospel advancing. By that I mean at the center of all that is being done as children and youth are ministered to, there should be a gospel at the center.
Yes.
Because the youth ministry is about influencing young people towards becoming disciples of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And so for me, that is the priority. It might differ then on how you do it and so on, but at the center it should be about the gospel.
But then what about if we're looking at the center being the gospel, and when you talk to other people, they normally think or have this idea that youth ministry is mostly just if I could say, a glorified babysitter, And if we look at youth ministry, we're looking at from kindergarten all the way to teenagers.
Well, the names might differ as to from what age do you start and when do you end. The stages also might differ. Some people would say that from babies to 2-3 years. That's the Sunday school, or 5 years Sunday school time, and then as they grow up, then you put them in different groups. Now that's about structuring your ministry according to the ages of the children you are dealing with. And we do, of course, emphasize the principle that your youth or children's ministry need to be age appropriate and developmental, so that there are things that you teach the babies, and then as they grow up and become aware of life, you begin then to introduce things that are at the age appropriate. So that is something else. But it's one of the problems then that sometimes as a church we do, or we have been doing, and I think it is changing. It has been what we are talking about, to assume that when we talk youth ministry, we're talking about just taking care of young people while real church is going on the other side. I think that has been the mistake, and many denominations, including the Methodist Church, have turned that corner to understand that youth ministry is as important as ministry for the adults. And when we're talking about young people, we're not talking about the church of tomorrow. We're talking about the church of the present. And so there is then that change, and that to say youth ministry is as important as all of ministry, because you're dealing with the church today. So that's why then I'm saying you can't then, during youth ministry, be doing everything else, just whiling away time. It is a time for the gospel, advancing the gospel of Jesus Christ. But of course, you do it in the way that it makes sense to young people. It is age appropriate, and it deals with issues that young people deal with. And so that is why then I want to say that it cannot leave out issues of mission. Because mission is about the gospel then being taken into the community. The gospel being practiced. So part of the principles of youth ministry must include missional work, so that while they are young, these disciples of Jesus Christ know that to be a Christian is to influence the community. So they need to have time to be taken out to see what's happening if they don't know. If they do, what then can we do as the young people to deal with the issues of the community?
And as we dealing with the issues of the community, maybe we could even kind of take a different route as well. And actually, no, it's not even a different route. It's just part of the whole process of dealing with the community. We have challenges, especially with the youth. And some of our biggest challenges that maybe I'd say we've encountered in ministry, in the present especially, is young people leaving the church and going away from the church. What do you think has caused that, especially in terms of looking at our traditional churches?
Yeah, for me, the main challenge that young people face with the traditional church is the methods that are used, which do not talk to where young people are.
Okay.
Especially these days where it seems like the attention span of young people is becoming shorter and shorter because of the gadgets that they live with and so on. So they live in their hands and so on, and the attention span for young people is really short. And when you go to traditional churches, our churches tend to be long. Our churches tend to be, there's no activity except at the time of singing.
Yes, yes.
Otherwise, even the liturgy is not allowing people to participate at times. So it needs someone who's able to concentrate.
Yes.
And most young people feel that the church is boring. Because they just cannot keep attention for 3 hours or 2 hours.
Yeah.
And so that for me is the main thing that I think keeps young people away from church. Again, even the language at times that we use in traditional churches, we depend on these old traditional hymn books, and that language just is difficult or doesn't make sense to young people, and so they just sometimes don't see where they fit in the whole thing. The other thing is the way in which young people get treated in traditional churches.
Yes.
They are actually made to feel unwanted. The fact that when it's these big services, you will find that in many churches there's no space for children and young people to sit.
That's true.
And when the church is full, children are taken outside because the adults need to get space and all of that, and there's just we are too busy to have children around and so on. So that could then make them feel, well, this is not our space.
Yes.
And we can go if we can, but they can avoid it as much as they can.
Okay. So do you think there could be room for a change within the system, the way the church's system is?
There is a big room for change, and a number of Methodist churches that I've seen have begun to change. There has been, there are churches where even the liturgies are kind of made to be responsive so that congregants, not just young people, but everybody in church can participate. The English-speaking churches have begun, I think they've begun earlier to do this, to involve everybody and to have a focus on young people by having youth pastors, people who will focus on Sunday school and children in the society. And so you find that there is appropriate way of doing church in those English-speaking churches. You still find that in a number of vernacular-speaking churches, there's difficulty in accommodating young people and children. The black churches' insistence on the 11 o'clock order of service and doing things as they used to be done becomes one of the things that is hard to change. And so it is in those churches that you find young people kind of reluctant to be at the Sunday service.
Yes.
But you'll find that there are youth groups and Wesley Guild and so on, where then young people would come and do church their way.
Yes.
And so I can say churches are trying differently to accommodate young people. But I think there is still room for improvement.
Okay. And don't you think maybe if we were to maybe reconsider as well, looking at how things are done at seminary, maybe reconsidering to have a youth ministry part of one of the courses, or a family ministry course, where they can get used to dealing with children and young people?
My understanding is that at seminary there are those courses. There might not be a focus on it, but at the seminary, ministers are actually exposed to, or introduced, let me say, to ways of ministering to different groupings.
Yes.
What tends to be the problem, though, with the Methodist system and structure is that while a minister might be aware of the kind of ministry to perform in a society, he or she will find herself in a circuit that has many societies. And then the focus then becomes just preaching and doing communion and rushing to the next one and so on. And you find that the time to really focus on groups is not there. You see a difference in the ministry where there is one minister in one society. Those ministers have time and ability to then have ministry with the youth, with children, and so on within a society. But where ministers have to run around in the circuits, you find that focusing on young people becomes less important, which is unfortunate.
And then maybe another thing about looking at leadership as well. How do you think youth pastors can better connect with and understand the needs of today's youth who are growing up in a digital, rapidly changing world as well? Because that's one of the challenges I think that the church has, especially in our vernacular spaces. Because what I see is that they'll always think of things such as, no, we don't have the budget for all these new gadgets or technological systems, and there's nothing else that we can do to actually move them into the next step. But yeah, so how can youth pastors better connect? If you were to maybe give me a lesson on how to connect with other young people in a digital space?
Well, how I see it is that digital space is very wide, and it differs from one area to another. But for me, the way we live is that everybody now has a cell phone.
Yes.
It might be a different kind, but especially young people, or most of them, there would be very few young people who do not have cell phones. So my sense is that youth pastors or those who minister to young people would need then to connect with them through their cell phones. I think at the time of COVID in 2020, somehow we were thrown or pushed into that world of connecting with cell phone and doing church through cell phones and so on, recording church messages and sending it out to everybody. So I think that has remained then as a legacy of COVID, that now we can do church digitally, and that is the way in which young people are more comfortable and are aware of and the way they communicate. It's through cell phones. The other thing then for me, besides then connecting digitally, I think there is room for physical connection. I do think that those who minister to children need to make time for physical connection with young people. As we are talking about the context in which we are, there are things that you are able to pick up when you see somebody face to face. Young people are dealing with a lot these days.
That is true.
And as a church, if we remain virtual, especially for young people, we will miss opportunities of helping young people who are struggling. Because they might give you no reason to think that they are struggling on the phone. But when you see this young person, this child face to face, you begin to see the changes. And then you are able to focus on that young person or that child and follow up as to what is happening in their lives, what are they facing in the home and all in the school and all of that. My sense and my belief is that these days we need to minister to people holistically, because people are going through so many things, particularly young people. Because while all these gadgets are progressive, they are also destructive. And so the way then to connect and be able to pick up things, I think, is still the old-fashioned face-to-face meetings. So I would advise that. Be digital, connect through gadgets and all of that, but also emphasize on physical connections. That's when you'll be able to minister properly to young people.
And then do you think that's the reason why, even when we look at the parents as well, are struggling a lot with that whole idea of connection and communicating with the young people?
It really, the times are very difficult in that even at the homes, if the face-to-face communication and insisting on it as a parent, if it doesn't happen, as a parent, you raise a child that you don't know, and the child does not know you. And you live in two worlds. While you think this is what we do in this home, this is the culture of this home, the practices. Your child is living in that world of that gadget, that or whatever they find on these connecting things,
Yes.
whether it's Facebook or whatever.
Yes.
They are taught something different, and your child grows up in a way that is strange to you. And there is no way where you come together, where you meet. So it is a difficult time where we need as people to insist where we can on physical connection and communication.
Okay, and then part of the role of the church is youth development, looking at our different organizations like your young adults ministry. Then we have the Wesley Guild, and we have all the different entities that we have. Well, what role do you see the church playing in holistic development of a young person and beyond just their spiritual growth?
Yeah. While the church has a role, and a big one at that, we need to recognize that actually the church comes closer to people once in a week, whereas 6 days of the week people are wherever they are.
Yes.
But knowing all of that, it is important that the church, it touches people, especially young people,
Yes.
In every sphere of life, so that while the focus might be spiritual growth and helping people to become more like Jesus every day, but we become aware that spiritually we grow up if there are things that need to happen physically for us to be well. There are things that happen to us mentally for us to be well, and so on. And so the church needs to be able then to touch all those spheres of life, parts of us as human beings, that which makes us human beings who are whole. The church need to be able to touch that. So I think then youth ministers, hence I was talking about this physical and face-to-face connection.
Yes.
Because that would be a way of then being exposed to a young person's other parts of life, so that you can see this child is not well, this young person is not well, and follow up on that. And then even end up getting to the family situation. Is this child being abused at home? Does all this come from abuse or bullying at school and all of that? So we cannot then do that if we only preach on Sunday or teach on Sunday and that is all.
Yes.
That is why then in the Methodist Church we have classes with class leaders who, while then the focus on Sunday will be on the preaching and so on, and people able to pray and do all of that, the class leaders then will be able to make follow-ups, meet with the people face to face, and at times go to their homes and find out how people are doing. We have emphasized as a church to say each society, each circuit needs to have a budget for young people, young youth ministry, so that then those who are ministering to young people. If they need to be traveling somewhere, they need to go somewhere, there is budget for doing that, because this is not just something that we do because we want to. This is part of the church of today.
Yes.
We talk about shaping tomorrow today.
Yes.
If then we are not focusing on young people and children today, it means then the future of the church is affected.
Yes.
And negatively affected. So it is then important that budget for youth ministries there, and then those who deal with young people, who minister to them, we are able then to make follow-up so that they touch the whole life of young people.
Okay. And then another question that I've always had, I've always wanted to ask someone who's been either bishop or in a higher ranking position is what's difficult about changing the formula to the the formula of the format actually of candidating when it comes to a youth pastor. Because the thing is, when you look at a youth pastor within the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, is that they technically do all the work. They go through the vocational, work within their period in youth ministry. How possible is it to change that format and maybe add those years that they have practiced within the context of the church and add them into their part of their candidating processes?
Yeah, I think that's something that the EMMU, which is the unit that deals with the training for ministries in the church, I think that is something that they might need to look at.
Yes.
Because what has happened is that, as you say, most people who are youth pastors, you will find that they are not trained. They are volunteers, or if they are being paid, it's just because it's people who have time, who can spend it with young people.
Yes.
And but where this is taken seriously, there is a course that trains youth pastors.
Yes, yes.
However, when one then candidates for ministry, that is hardly looked at to say, what did you do as you were training as a youth pastor? How does that link with what you do when you train for becoming a candidate for the ministry?
Yes.
I think what we can, for now, what gets looked at is, are you a full preacher? To be able then to candidate for the ministry.
Yes.
And you'll find that some youth pastors have not done any preaching courses.
Yes.
And so they would then need to spend 2 years to try and become full preachers before they candidate. So I hear that it is important then to look at what is it that those who train for being youth pastors, what is it that they study?
Yes.
And how is that going to be upgraded then so that they can become candidates for the ministry? For now, it's different types of training, which then makes it, which does not combine or which does not meet anywhere in the process of ministry.
Although, to my defense, as a youth pastor, we do have a course, the 4G course that was introduced into the Methodist Church.
Yes.
And theologically, it is sound because part of the training, it comes from the University of Pretoria, from the lectures there, and part of the training comes from many of our ministers within the church.
Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like can't EMMU maybe look at the minister that the youth pastor has served under as a invigilator, in lack of a better term, for that system to be processed?
Yeah, as I'm saying, I think EMMU would need then to look at that, could be asked to look at that. But at the moment, as you say, it's just different streams of training, and that does not connect anywhere.
Yes.
But I think it is possible to put it together. What I think would be important would be, instead then of making the 4G, what I want to say is that what would need to happen maybe is that within the 4G, there are particular and clear courses of theology that would connect to what the candidates do, so that when then you candidate, you don't have to repeat that, or you don't have to start from scratch doing things that you could have done as you train for youth ministry. Because for me, it is important that youth pastors are theologically grounded. So that as they teach, as they influence young people, what they teach is theologically proper and going along with the theology that we speak in the Methodist Church. So there would need then to be communication between the two. Between the candidature process and the 4G.
Okay.
Although some people who are youth pastors have no interest of candidating, but there are those who would then, who have a calling for ministry in general, who would want to then candidate in some time in the future.
Although for some, I think, would argue and say they do have, they do want to pursue that calling, and the only thing that's hindering them maybe could be that whole process of candidating as well. Because they'll think they've done so much in ministry, in youth ministry, that they could literally run a church, you know, but now when you get to the candidating process,
you start from scratch.
You start from scratch.
It could discourage somebody.
It could discourage them, yes. But well, thank you very much, Dr. Malinga, for this opportunity to just have a conversation with you and, you know, just look at other avenues of how we can work through guiding youth ministry within the church. As a minister who was the first woman to be the presiding bishop, what would you say to encourage young people to actually follow that route of adhering to their call into ministry?
Well, I think that for those for whom youth ministry is a calling. It's not just accepting to look after young people,
Yes.
but it is a calling to share the gospel of Christ, to influence others with the gospel. I would really encourage them to pursue the call, for me, that in itself is a calling, and it is a complete calling. I don't want to think of any calling being less than the other. As I am saying that youth ministry is about the church today.
Yes.
My advice would be, as you are serving and following your calling now,
Yes.
take that seriously. Take the calling seriously and take it as a great privilege to influence and shape other people. And shaping other people, influencing other people is done in the name of God. You're not just doing it for yourself so that people know you, but you are influencing those young people to be Christ-like. And therefore it is important to take your calling seriously. Secondly, I would advise that you remain humble and you rely not only on your wisdom but on God's wisdom. Stay connected to the one who has called you. Ministry in general, and I'm sure youth ministry, I've never been a youth pastor, but I'm sure youth ministry, while it is fulfilling, but at the same time it is bruising. It is exhausting, and sometimes it is disheartening. You might find there would be days where you feel, Lord, I don't want to do this. But you need to remain connected to the one who has called you, to be able to inspire, encourage you when you get discouraged to go on. And know that it's not about you, it is about God and God's values that we are trying to influence and to pass on to the next generation. I really believe that youth ministry is very important in the church for the future of the church. If this is a generation, an older generation, if we do not take youth ministry seriously, we are actually failing the one who has called us. It is important that today, now, we guide the next generation, especially looking at the challenges of the time. People would need to be well spiritually to survive the challenges of this time. And especially young people need the church to be involved in their growing up. Of course, when they grow up, they choose whatever they want to choose. But if the foundation has been laid, then as a church we would have fulfilled our role. Because if not now, in the future, when they really face life as adults, they will have had a foundation of God and spiritual life, and they would go back to that and choose that as a way of life. So that would be my advice.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Malinga. No, it's not the Dr. Malinga who kicked. This is a different.
Yeah, I need to meet that Dr. Malinga. The Malingas are the same, so
Yes.
somewhere, somehow,
Yeah.
we connect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for awarding us with this opportunity, and hope we
Yes.
can have more conversations like this and help to shape the ministry as a whole, and help to shape the church as a whole.
Thank you.
Yeah, may God
No,
bless you.
thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. And thank you very much for those viewing and those listening. So it's Quiet Conversation, the podcast with L. Jackson Pasteur. We out. Peace.